好，现在我们开始讲今天晚上的课。
So we're going to begin now with this evening's teaching.
那么今天晚上的课呢，就是这个题目就是梦的讯息，就是
So the topic of this evening's teaching is the messages of dreams.
那么梦的讯息是什么呢？就是说梦告诉我们了什么，或者是梦给我们透露了什么样的讯息，就是这个意思。
So when we talk about the messages of dreams, what is it that we mean by that? Well, primarily what it is that dreams convey to us, what meaning it is that dreams impart.
在藏传佛教的密法里面呢，这个梦的修法是一个非常重要的修法。
Within the Vajrayana teachings of Tibetan Buddhism, dream-related practices are extremely important.
因为这个梦如果我们去分析的话，这梦里面就有很多的东西我们可以学习，然后不但是学习，而且我们可以把梦用来做一些修行上的非常有利的事情。
And the reason for this is that if we analyze dreams, then there's a great deal of content within them that we can learn from. And not only content that we can learn from, but we can also use dreams as an excellent foundation for our practice.
然后我们没有不修心的人，对一个不修心的人来说梦就是没有什么价值的。大家都觉得梦是假的，没有什么意义的。
To someone who isn't a practitioner, then dreams are of no value. They consider them to be not real and therefore quite meaningless.
但是作为一个修心人来说，梦就是一个非常重要的。
But to a practitioner, dreams are extremely important.
比如说死亡也是一样比如说我们对一个不学习不修心的人来说，死亡它就是一个非常恐怖的平时都我们不愿意去谈论更加的不愿意去面对就是一个这样子的事情。
It's the same with death as well. To someone who is not a practitioner, death is something that is terrifying. It's something that one doesn't wish to speak about, let alone confront.
但是作为一个修行人来说，死亡它也是一个非常非常重要的修行的机会。
But in the same way, death to a practitioner is an excellent opportunity to practice.
如果我们有了一种方法，也就是这种修心的方法，那这样子的话，我们平时我们大家认为没有意义的、没有价值的很多东西，都变得非常有意义和非常有价值。
If we have at hand an appropriate method or an appropriate practice, then many things that to begin with were without value or without meaning can be transformed to possessing great meaning and value.
那么梦有一个就是专门针对梦的有一个修法，这个就叫做梦瑜伽。
There is a practice that is specifically tailored to dreams, and that's called dream yoga.
这个梦的瑜伽它就是一个非常特殊的一种修法。
And this dream yoga is an extremely special form of practice.
那么今天我们讲的这个梦瑜伽，就是梦瑜伽里面的一部分。
What we are going to be talking about tonight in relation to dream yoga is only part of the content of this practice.
如果我们要学这个梦瑜伽的全部的内容，这样子的话，那首先是要 有每一个人都必须要关丁啊，这个关丁的要求也是比较高的。
If we wish to study the contents of dream yoga in its entirety, then it's necessary that everybody first receive an appropriate empowerment.
然后灌了丁以后呢，我们大概就是需要2个星期、3个星期这样子的时间啊当中啊，然后边学习边打坐修心啊，必须要有这样子的指导啊，才能够学完啊这个正规的梦瑜伽，全部的梦瑜伽。
And having received an appropriate empowerment, it's then necessary that we spend approximately 2 to 3 weeks receiving the full instructions on this practice during a period where we receive instructions and then implement them through meditation. And it's only this way that we can go about learning the entirety of dream yoga.
所以梦瑜伽啊，它的全部的内容是1节课是没有办法讲完的。
So as for the practice of dream yoga, it's not possible to cover it fully in one teaching.
但是啊，我们可以就是在1节课里面呢，简单的去了解一下这个梦瑜伽。
However, it is possible for us to gain a basic overall understanding of dream yoga in one teaching.
同时呢，我们也可以去学一部分的梦瑜伽的实际的修法。
And we can also learn some basic practices related to dream yoga too.
那么这一部分的梦瑜伽，没有关丁的人也可以学习。
And these exercises within dream yoga are ones that people who have not received an empowerment are able to learn.
首先梦瑜伽跟我们的修心跟我们的修心有很多方面的非常重要的这个联系关系。
So the first thing to note is that dream yoga has many important connections to our practice.
首先，我们这个修心修心学佛，首先是必须要有自己的见解。
The first thing is that in terms of our practice, the first thing we need to establish is our view.
那这个梦瑜伽跟我们的见解是有非常密切的关系。
And dream yoga is extremely closely related to our view.
然后第二跟我们的这个打坐修心也有关系。
Dream yoga is also related to our meditation.
第三我们的日常生活当中的一举一动跟梦瑜伽也有关系。
And dream yoga is also related to our everyday life, every aspect of our everyday life.
首先，我们简单的说，梦瑜伽跟我们的观点跟这个我们的见解有什么样的关系？
So the first thing we're going to talk about is the relationship between dream yoga and our view.
在这个之前呢，我们首先告诉大家梦是什么。
But before we begin to talk about this, we need to look at what dreams are.
我们可以这样子理解这个世界我们的外面的这个世界从佛教，尤其是从密法的角度看就是有3种不同的宇宙，或者是3种不同的世界。
We can understand it in this way. From a Buddhist perspective, and especially from a Tantric Buddhist perspective, it's possible to classify the external world into 3 different realms or 3 different worlds.
那么第一个世界就是我们现在的这个现实生活就是我们大家都认为是非常真实的这个物质世界。
The first of these is our ordinary waking consciousness, our everyday lives that everyone regards to be very real.
那么这个世界我们大家都认为它就是一个世界，我们可以在这个世界当中去生活去生存这样子，这是一个我们公认的认为这个就是真实存在的。
And this particular world is one that everyone regards to be real, truly existent, a substantial world in which we lead our lives and lead our existence.
然后第二个世界就是梦的世界。
The second world or realm is the realm of dreams.
那么梦的世界也就是跟我们的现实生活的这个世界一样在现实生活当中可以有的能够有的这些东西在梦里面都一样的可以有。
And the dream world is the same as our everyday ordinary waking world insofar as all the things that it's possible for us to enjoy or have in our ordinary waking world, it is possible also to have in the dream state.
然后我们做梦的时候，做梦的人他也可以在这个世界里可以生活，可以工作，可以生存。
And it's also possible for a dreamer in the dream state to work and lead their lives as they do in everyday life.
然后第三个世界，这是我们的意识创造出来的世界。
And the third world or realm is that which is created by our minds or our consciousness.
那么我们的意识创造出来的世界是简单的这个创造，比如说我们人静下来，然后呢心里去想很多的世界比如说像西方极乐世界或者是地狱或者是世界上的另外一个地方，我们都可以去在我们的意识当中都可以去思考。
This world is a product of our imagination. So, say we sit down quietly and we conjure in our minds a different place. It might be Amitabha's Pure Land or the Hell Realms or a different place on the earth.
这些都是我们的想象当中的世界。
These are all worlds or places within our imagination.
那么这个想象当中的世界，我们也可以在这个当中生活，也可以在这个当中生存我们比如说去想去观想某一个世界，然后呢我们观想我自己在这个世界里生活等等等等，这样子的时候呢，然后这个世界也会给我们带来一些这个比如说我们观想我在某一个地方然后生活，然后呢有人来帮助我心里产生这个欢喜，或者是有人来偷抢我的东西，那么我心里不高兴等等，那么这个世界它也在某种程度上可以影响到我们的情绪。
In this world, it's this world of our imagination. It's also possible for us to lead lives. For example, through visualization, we might visualize ourselves living in a certain place where somebody helps us and we give rise to a feeling of happiness. Similarly, we might visualize or imagine someone stealing our things and then giving rise to a feeling of unhappiness. So, to some degree, this world is able to has the capacity to impact on our mood or emotional state.
然后这三个世界里面最真实的、最稳固的跟我们最有影响的，那当然就是这个物质世界。
Of course, of these three different worlds that have just been described, the most stable, the most realistic, and the most impactful is that of our everyday waking consciousness.
然后其次就是梦的世界。
And secondly, the dream world or dream realm.
然后第三就是我们的意识创造出来的世界。
And the third is the imaginary world or the world conjured by our imagination.
这三个世界 都有一些不一样的地方，但是也有一些共通的、相同的地方。
So these three worlds have their differences, but they also have their commonalities.
然后我们的另外一个，我们的意识可以创造出来的世界，比如说我们去想某一件比如说我们想这个周围想象出来一个跟我们现在现实的东西不一样的世界。那么时间长了以后呢，至少我们自己很清楚地看到这个世界就变成了我自己所想象的这样子的世界。
Insofar as our imaginary world is concerned, it's possible for us to imagine a world that is different from the one that we presently occupy, and in a long time sense for it to become like the world we occupy.
那么比如说南传佛教南传佛教的这个修心这种冥想当中有一个，就是比如说为了控制自己的欲望，把所有的人都观想为骷髅头就是骨架。那这样子这个时间长了以后呢，最后呢就是用他的眼睛也可以看到所有人都变得这个骷髅头，就是骨架这样子。但这个当然不是真实的，但是呢，因为他的这个想象力，因为他的观想的力量，至少他自己的这个感官当中会出现这样子的世界。
An example of this would be a visualization exercise in the Theravada tradition of viewing those around oneself as skeletons, as visualizing them as skeletons. And it's possible for a practitioner who has honed their visualization to a sufficient degree for those around them to really appear as skeletons in their own eyes.
那么这三个不一样的世界，从表面上看，我们认为物质世界是真实的，真实不虚的，然后梦的世界是虚拟的，然后呢，我们意识创造出来的世界呢更加的虚拟从表面上看有这样子的不一样有这样子的不一样的地方。
Looking at these three different worlds or realms in a superficial way, we tend to regard the everyday waking consciousness or the material world as the real one, and then following the dream world to be the virtual realm or the unreal realm. And then we tend to regard the world of our imagination as even more unreal or virtual than that of the dream realm.
那么我们为什么我们认为物质世界是真实的，另外的两个世界，尤其是梦的世界是不真实呢？因为我们目前还不太了解这三个世界的本质的区别不太了解它们的结构所以我们简单的认为物质世界是真实，梦世界是虚拟。
So why is it that at the present point in time we tend to regard the material realm as the real one, but the dream realm and the realm of our imagination as being unreal? Well, the reason for this is that where we currently stand, we don't properly understand the essence of the differences between these three realms. We don't have a proper grasp of the structure of these three different realms, and so we therefore rather simply regard the material realm to be the real or substantial one, and the other two to be unreal or virtual.
但是深入的去观察，深入的去分析和了解这样子的时候呢，我们会发现这个里面呢没有哪一个是真实，哪一个是虚拟这样子的区别。
However, if we were to look into things more deeply and gain a deeper understanding, we would discover that, in fact, of these three realms, there is no single one that is real and there is no single one that is unreal either.
所以当年阿底夏尊者他来西藏的时候， 然后他在路上他有点担心他到了西藏以后呢，他没有办法把这个佛教这样的这个空心非常清楚的给大家描述。
Many centuries ago, when the Venerable Atisha first came to Tibet, on his way he felt rather concerned that he would not be able to impart the Buddhist concept of emptiness to Tibetans with the clarity he desired.
为什么呢？他说因为在印度那个时候就有很多的魔术师，连魔术师他们幻化出来的东西跟佛教这样的虚拟世界空心是比较相似的，所以用魔术师变化出来的东西来描述佛教的空心是比较容易的那么那个时候呢，阿底峡尊者他认为西藏就是没有这样子的魔术师，所以他觉得这个空心很难描述。
And the reason he was concerned that he wouldn't be able to explain Buddhism clearly enough was that in India there were many magicians who would conjure many magical apparitions, and using this it was easy to impart the Buddhist concept of emptiness. However, Atisha's concern was that in Tibet there were no such magicians, and so therefore communicating the concept of emptiness to Tibetans would be quite hard.
那么当他这样子担心的时候呢，他的身边的人就说虽然没有这样子的魔术师但是没有关系，用梦来将这个空心这样子的话大家都能够容易理解然后呢阿底峡听了这个以后就很高兴虽然没有魔术师但没关系有梦那么把这个梦告诉大家，然后呢把描述空心这样子就很容易。
But those who were by Atisha's side told him not to worry, that even though there were no magicians in Tibet, there were dreams, and that he could use dreams to impart the concept of emptiness just as effectively. So Atisha felt very happy about this. He stopped worrying that there wouldn't be any magicians because he would be able to communicate effectively the notion of emptiness through dreams instead.
首先我们要去了解一下这三个世界当中我们现在就给大家介绍一下这个梦的世界，其他的两个世界我们现在是不讲。
So of these three worlds, three different worlds or realms, Khenpo is now going to go on to explain the dream realm. Tonight we're not going to go into the other two realms.
首先第一个，我们人睡眠的时候为什么做梦？
So first of all, why is it at night when we fall asleep that we have dreams?
梦它是以什么东西产生的？
What is it that produces dreams?
然后这些各种各样的这个梦里面有没有一些讯息有没有一些有意义的讯息？
And within the various kinds of dreams that we have, are there different messages that are of meaning to us?
首先我们在现实生活当中，我们看到的这个世界，我们的眼睛看到的世界是什么呢？就是因为我们的精神，人的精神，人的感受。通过这种眼睛这种感官去了解外面的这个世界，感受了外面的世界，这个就叫做眼睛看到。
So in terms of our everyday lives, the world that we perceive around us is perceived through our eyes. That is, it's perceived through the eye consciousness. And this is what we call seeing.
我们听到声音的时候，也就是我们的精神就通过我们的耳朵这个感官 去感受外面的物质的一部分这个就叫做我们的耳朵听见了声音。
And for hearing as well, for hearing sounds, this is a case of our consciousness relying on our ear, the organ of our ear, to perceive one element or aspect of the material universe, and this is what we refer to as our ears hearing sound.
好，然后我们做梦的时候，人就是进入了深度的睡眠这个时候是不做梦的就是失去了知觉一样这个时候是没有做梦，没有意识。
So when we dream or when we first fall asleep, we enter a stage where we are not dreaming.
这个时候人的意识我们现在的这个人的意识，它进入了一个什么样的状态呢？它就进入了用佛教讲这个阿赖耶识，阿赖耶识就是我们的人的最基本的一个最深层次的意识，就进入这个状态。
During this stage, from a Buddhist perspective, we say that the consciousness that we have entered the alaya vijnana or the fundamental consciousness.
那么进入了这个状态的时候呢，因为这个阿赖耶识它是没有思维，所以呢，人这个时候是不会做梦的，是深度的睡眠。
And because there is no mental activity in the alaya vijnana, then there is no dream activity. This is a extremely state of deep sleep.
然后开始做梦的时候这个阿赖耶识它有稍稍的波动然后这个波动就是实际上从这个阿赖耶识当中就产生了意识刚才深度的这个睡眠的时候是只有阿赖耶识没有意识。那现在开始做梦的时候呢，意识从阿赖耶识当中开始产生开始波动。
When we begin to dream, this takes place when small movements occur in the foundation consciousness. So prior to this, there is no movement at all. However, when the movement starts, then we begin to have the mind consciousness.
然后意识它从阿赖耶识当中产生了以后呢，然后它就在我们的人的身体里就有很多的活动开始有很多的活动。
And once the mind consciousness becomes active, then there is movement, considerable movement in different parts of the body.
这个时候意识，我们的人的意识就像风，就像空气一样。比如说风从这个房间从门和窗户进入了这个房间，然后呢又从这个门出去，然后它会又进入另外一个房间一样。
During this time, the consciousness in our body is like air or wind. It's like wind entering the room from this door or window and then passing through the door and move the other door and then moving into a different room.
然后这个时候我们的意识在人的身体里身体的上上下下各个的这个感官当中去活动。
And so during this period, our consciousness moves all around our body, from the top to the bottom, in and out of our different sensory perceptions.
那么我们的这个时候的意识它走到这个眼睛这个感官的时候，我们会梦到五颜六色的各种各样的颜色各种各样非常漂亮的颜色。
When our consciousness moves into our eye organ, then we experience dreams of splendid, vivid colors.
这些颜色，在我们梦里面看到的这些颜色，它不在某一个世界里，而是我们的意识进入了眼睛的时候的一种感受。
The colors that we experience in this dream don't exist in a particular world, rather they are a perception that is produced through our consciousness entering into our eye.
这个时候我们会梦到就像彩虹一样的各种各样的颜色非常漂亮的，或者是不漂亮的，或者非常恶心的这样子的各种各样的颜色。
So when this happens, we might dream of extremely beautiful rainbow-like colors. On the other hand, we might dream of extremely disgusting colors as well. In any case, we dream of all manner of different colors.
然后我们的眼睛也有很多的脉也有很多的脉。那这些脉有很多不同的有些脉是好的，或者是不太好的，有各种各样的脉。然后我们的这个意识进入了这些脉，好的脉看到的是漂亮的颜色。然后不怎么好的这个脉进入了这个，就在这个脉里面活动的时候呢，然后他会看到的是不太漂亮的颜色。但是这些颜色都不在外面，就在自己的内在的感受当中。
Within our eye consciousness or within our eye organs, there are many different energetic channels. Some of them are more positive and others less so. And when our consciousness moves into the more positive of these channels, then we dream of very beautiful colors. When it moves into those that are less positive, then we dream of not beautiful colors. In any case, whatever the nature of the color that we dream of, these colors don't exist in the external world, but rather they are a perception that we experience.
但是这个时候做梦的人他不知道这个颜色是自己的一种感受，而他认为这个颜色是外面的世界，是物质这样子。然后他就迷茫然后就是去为了这些追求这些颜色，然后在梦里面做很多很多的取舍然后就感到很辛苦，感到很累，很烦恼这样子。
However, the dreamer inside the dream doesn't realize that these colors don't exist in the external world. They don't realize they're just a perception. And so therefore, in order to chase after these colors, they engage in many different actions. They expend a lot of energy and experience hardship.
同样的道理我们在现实生活当中我们的眼睛看到了外面的世界。什么叫做这个看到外面的世界？如果我们不再去深入的去了解的话，那么看到外面的世界，这个是一个很简单，每一个人都知道的。什么叫看见东西这个就不需要去观察，大家都很明白。但是如果我们进一步的去了解到底什么叫做看见怎么样看见，为什么看见，那这个时候呢，我们会发现有一个跟梦一模一样的道理。
And it's the same with our everyday waking life as well. When we see things in the external world, well, to speak of seeing something in the external world, if we are not aiming at a deep understanding of what it means to see, then it's pretty straightforward. Everybody knows what it means to see things. It's a very easy concept indeed. However, if we want to go deeper than this and really look more deeply into what it means to see, how how it is that we see, why we see, then we will discover, in fact, that there is a principle in common between dreams and our everyday waking life.
这个道理是什么？我们看到的这个世界五颜六色，有各种各样的颜色。但是这些颜色这个我们很早以前也讲过，你们大家也就知道这个科学家也告诉了我们，跟佛教是一模一样的观点。那么这些颜色我们的衣服的颜色，然后呢，这束花的颜色，这一栋楼的颜色，就是凡是我们的生活当中出现的任何一个东西，它们都是实际上是没有颜色。那么没有颜色，那我们看到的这些颜色是来自于什么呢？然后他们会告诉我们，那么这些都是我们自己的大脑里面的一种画面科学家告诉我们，这是大脑里面的画面。
So what is this principle in common between what we see in our everyday lives and what we see in our dreams? Well, the rainbow-like, vivid, colored world that we see around us, what Buddhism has to say about this is the same as what science tells us, and that is that all the colors that we perceive around us, whether it be the colors of our clothes or a flower or a building, in short, any color that we perceive in the world around us doesn't inherently exist. It doesn't inherently exist in the object. So where then does this color come from? Well, it is an image that is produced by our brain.
就像这么漂亮的一束花，我们的眼睛看起来这么漂亮，这么的美为什么呢？就是因为它有这么多的颜色这么鲜艳的颜色，我们认为很漂亮但是它的这么鲜艳的颜色实际上不是它的，而是我自己的大脑里面然后我们现在迷茫了，我们把我们的大脑里面的颜色，我们认为是它的颜色，然后呢，我们就是为了得到各种各样的这个颜色，然后就是为了这个我们去做很多的事情，然后在这个过程当中呢，也让我们产生了很多很多的烦恼和不开心这样子。
If we take this vase of flowers here, they look so beautiful and lovely. They have such bright colors. In fact, it's the bright colors of the flowers that leads us to regard them to be as beautiful as they are. And but in actual fact, these colors don't reside in the flowers. They're produced at the level of our own brains. This is a color that is an image that is produced in our brain. It's not the colors flower. However, believing colors to exist in external objects, we engage in all kinds of actions in order to obtain things, and this causes us quite amount of we expend a lot of energy on this, and it causes us a lot of we experience a lot of affliction and suffering.
然后佛教就告诉我们他没有说这些颜色是我们大脑的画面，他就是说这个颜色是我们的眼睛的感受是我们眼睛这个感官的感受实际上这两个是不同的名词不同的表达的方式实际上就是同样的内容。
Buddhism doesn't say that this color is an image produced by the brain. Rather, it says that color is a perception of the eye consciousness. Even though the expressions, the way that it's put is different, nevertheless the same meaning is being communicated.
那么它跟蒙是什么差别呢？蒙也就是因为我们的意识在我们的身体里活动的时候，它就进入了我们的眼睛的感官，然后就看到了很多很多的颜色 现实生活当中，也就是我们的意识通过我们的眼睛这个感官看这个世界的时候，然后这个世界就变成了五颜六色实际上梦里面也没有这样子的五颜六色的世界现实生活当中也没有两个都是没有什么的不一样。
So what is the difference then in terms of color perception between our dream state and our ordinary waking state? Well, when we are dreaming, our consciousness resides in our eye consciousness, and we perceive colors in our everyday lives. Our consciousness perceives the world around us through our eyes, and it perceives it to be made up of many different colors. These colors do not inherently exist in the dream state, and neither do they in our everyday waking state either.
那么这个世界就像60、70年代的时候小孩有一个小孩子玩的，这叫做万花筒吧。万花筒知道对，万花筒这个对着光看的时候，然后这里面就是就有五颜六色的各种各样的东西但是里面是没有这个东西的，这是就是因为光的作用，里面看到各种各样的颜色我们的眼睛看这个世界，实际上就是小孩早期的时候，现在可能没有不玩这样子了就这个万花筒一样。万花筒里面的世界一样。
I just missed the beginning of that, but in actual fact what Campbell said was that back in the 1960s or 70s, young children used to play with kaleidoscopes, and so you'd look into the kaleidoscope and you'd see all kinds of colors that existed, but in actual fact they didn't. Well, the world that we perceive around us in its myriad colors is just like a kaleidoscope.
但是这个现实生活的我们看到的世界呢，就是因为比梦里面我们看到的世界稍微时间上可以时间久一点，也就是相对就是稳固一点，所以我们就认为它是真实的。
However, by comparison, our everyday waking state, in terms of the time that we are able to perceive it, is slightly longer than that of a dream. So relatively speaking, our everyday waking state is more stable than the dream state.
然后第二我们梦里面，然后我们的意识在我们的身体里面这个活动的时候呢，它有些时候进入了我们的耳朵这个感官，然后我们的意识进入了这个耳朵里面的也有很多很多的脉进入了这个耳朵的感官的时候呢，然后我们梦里面就会感觉到各种各样的声音非常好听的声音音乐的声音，然后很恐怖的，比如说像大雷这样子的声音，各种各样的声音然后会出现。
And in our dreams, as our consciousness moves around our bodies, it can enter our ear organs. And just as the same with our eye organ, there are many different channels inside our ears. And when the consciousness enters some of these channels, it will perceive sounds of a pleasant nature, such as music, pleasant music. By entering other channels in our ear, it might perceive horrifying sounds, such as thunder. So it's possible that the consciousness, depending on what channels of the ear it enters, will perceive sounds of different kinds.
但是做梦的人那个时候不知道这就是他自己的感觉，他以为外面的世界就有一个这样子的声音所以大雷的时候就非常的恐怖然后就是听到了音乐的声音的时候呢，然后感到非常的开心然后就是为了这些事情在梦里面都有些时候感到很开心，有些时候感到非常的这个恐惧然后 在梦里面这样子就有活得很辛苦很累但是实际上这些都不在外面，就在自己的这个身体里面但是做梦的人他不知道。
But the person who is dreaming doesn't realize that these are all their own perception. Rather, they think that these sounds truly exist in the external world, and on this basis they feel very scared, if they hear thunder. On the other hand, hearing music, they might feel very happy. So just like this, in our dreams, depending on what we hear, we might feel happy, we might feel fearful, and on this basis we find ourselves being very tired and vexed. But in actual fact, none of these sounds exist in the external world. The dreamer doesn't realize that they are perceiving them at the level of their own body. They don't realize this is happening.
然后我们在现实生活当中，我们就认为我们听到的声音跟梦里面完全是不一样因为梦是假的，我们听到的就是真实的存在的这么认为但是如果我们再进一步的去分析的时候呢，原来在现实生活当中我们听到的所谓的声音也跟就是梦里面原来就是完全是一样。
But everyone tends to believe that in our everyday waking lives, the sounds that we hear are real, whereas those sounds that we hear in our dreams are fake. However, if we look into this more deeply, then we can arrive at an understanding that in actual fact, the sounds that we perceive in our dreams and those that we perceive in our everyday waking lives are exactly the same.
然后佛教就是这么早就告诉我们，我们所听到的声音实际上不是外在的声音，而是我们的耳朵的这个感觉，就是一个他的感受外界是没有声音。
But Buddhism told us from very early on that the sounds that we hear do not exist inherently in the external world, but rather are a perception. We experienced as a perception of our ear consciousness.
那么这一点科学家也同样发现了，他们也告诉我们声音是不存在的所谓的声音是根本就不存在。那么什么是声音比如说说话的人的声带震动的时候，然后它就影响了这个空气，然后呢在空气当中产生了波，然后这个波就传到我们每一个人的耳朵，然后这个波就震动了我们的耳膜，这个时候我们的耳膜因为产生了震动，所以我们就感觉到了一种所谓的声音那么除了这个以外，外界是没有声音但是我们听到声音的人不知道这个道理，我们以为外面就是有声音。
Scientists as well have told us that sound doesn't truly exist. That which we understand as sound, in fact, is a case of, say, a speaker speaking, moving their vocal cords, which produce sound waves which reach the ear of the hearer, stimulate provoke some stimulation which is then experienced by the listener as sound. Besides this process that takes place, there is no other inherent sound. However, this is not something that the hearer understands. The hearer believes this sound to exist in the external world.
所以梦我们今天的这个题目梦的讯息，就是梦就告诉我们不但是它是虚拟的，而且我们一直都认为是真实的这个世界梦就透露给我们一个信息，他说不但是我是虚拟的，而且你认为是真实的这个世界也是跟我一样的不真实 这就是梦给我们透露的讯息。
So in terms of the message that dreams tell us, well, the main message that dreams tells us is that just as they are unreal, so too is that world that we regard to be so real and substantial. What dreams tell us is that they are the same.
但是做梦的时候，我们不知道梦里面的这些东西都是不存在。然后我们回到现实生活的时候呢，我们同样也不知道这个现实生活的这些东西呢，当中的这些东西呢，跟梦一样，我们始终都没有发现。那个没有发现物质，这个在佛教里面就叫做无明无明就是无知愚昧，所以我们拼命的去追求外面的这个各种各样的东西，然后呢，我们又不知道外面的东西到底是什么。在梦里面为什么不知道呢？就是因为我们是无明，所以不知道。梦里面实际上就是这样子，但是我们也不知道然后呢，回到现实生活的时候也不知道这是假的为什么不知道？就是因为无明。
So in our dream state, we don't realize that the world that we perceive is unreal. We don't realize this, we don't understand it because of our ignorance. Then when we wake up in our ordinary waking lives, just the same, due to ignorance, we don't recognize or understand the lack of substantialness of this existence everywhere. And so due to this ignorance, we pursue all kinds of different things, and this is all on the basis of our ignorance.
然后我们的意识在做梦的时候就会进入我们的心脏和大脑里面的一些非常细微的、非常狭窄的这样子的脉进入了这个脉的时候呢，我们就会梦到我们来到了，比如说像隧道地下通道然后呢不通空气的，然后就是黑暗的然后非常非常狭窄的这个地方然后就感觉很不舒服很恐惧会梦到这些。
When we're dreaming, our consciousness can also travel to channels in our heart and in our brain. It can enter into channels that are extremely narrow, extremely fine. And when it does this, we might dream that we have entered into an underground pipe or channel which is very narrow and dark with no air, and we might experience great fear.
然后我们的心脏和大脑密宗讲这个心间大脑都有脉轮脉轮就是脉的一种结构。那个脉当中呢，有些脉就是比较开阔的这样子的脉，然后我们的意识进入了这种比较开阔的这样子的脉当中的时候呢，然后我们会梦到我们来到了非常开阔的草原或者是海边这样子的，会做这样子的梦。
And in our heart and in our brains, there are wheels of channels, and if our consciousness enters into larger and more open channels, then it is possible that we will dream of open, expansive spaces such as a grassland or the ocean.
然后我们有一部分有些脉大脑和心脏的有些脉。就我们的意识进入了这个脉里面的时候呢，他就会看到很多过去的，比如说以前的人过去的人已经去世的人就是经常就会碰到这些人。
And there are also some channels in the heart and in the brain that when our consciousness enters into them, we dream of things of the past, including people who have already died.
然后有些脉 有些脉进入了有些脉里面的时候呢，他就会看到未来的即将要发生的未来会发生的一些事情他就会梦到。
And then there are other channels that when our consciousness enters into, we dream of things or events that will occur in the future.
比如说我们就是平时就有一句话，就是叫做日所思夜所梦，就是说我们白天我们去思考的这些东西呢，梦里面会出现。当然很多梦是有这样子的，但是根本不是所有的梦都是这样子。
There is a saying that the things that we think about during the day we will dream about at night, but it's not the case that this happens in all dreams, or that what is experienced in all dreams is a result of this.
比如说我们有一个朋友10年都没有见10年都没有见，然后呢，我今天也就根本就没有去想这个人根本就没有去想，然后呢，也根本没有听到关于他的任何的消息但是我今天晚上梦到了以后呢，确实明天我就见到了他，或者是我听到了他的关于他的某些这个消息这个就是我们的现实生活当中每一个人都有的这种经历每一个人都会有的。
Everyone has an experience or has likely had an experience of something like, say, not having seen a friend in 10 years, not having even thought about them and not having heard any news about them, and yet dreaming that they will meet them tomorrow or dreaming about them and then meeting them the next day, or perhaps hearing news about them the following day. Nearly everyone has had an experience like this.
在白天我从来没有去说过或者想过的这样子的事情然后梦里面就梦到了，然后呢就过2天没过多久确实是就发生了跟梦里面的一模一样的事情这个经历我们绝大多数的人都会有的。
So a situation where during the day we don't even turn our minds to something, but then at night we dream about it, and then a couple of days later or a particular time, or within a short amount of time, things actually take place as we dreamt about them at night. Almost everyone has an experience like this.
然后还有一些比较重大的事情将来会发生的一些重大事情，比如说1个月内2个月之内发生的一些重大事情好的或者是不好的这样子的重大事情也会提前梦到这个不是所有人，这个有些人的梦是非常非常灵的有些人就提前会梦到梦到了以后呢，确实就是发生了这样子的事情。
And then there are times when we dream about important events in advance, so extremely important or consequential events of a good nature and a bad nature. Sometimes we might dream about these 1 or 2 months before they actually take place.
这些都是事实，这些都是事实实际上真实的存在的，几乎每一个人的这个经历当中也会有这样子，所以我们没有办法简单的说日所思夜所梦，那么这个是说不通的当然有一部分梦可以，有一部分的梦是可以这样子解释，但是呢根本不是所有梦都是这样子。
So these kinds of dreams are real, they're true, they do take place, and the majority of people have had these kinds of experiences. So we can't dismiss these dreams simply by saying those things that we think about during the day, we dream about at night. While that might be the case in some cases, it certainly doesn't explain all dreams.
好，这样子以后呢，我们比如说梦里面也会有这个，比如说死亡的比如自己的这个死亡的征兆，比如前兆比如说他每一天都是梦一种同样的一个非常非常特殊的这个梦，那这样子的话，就有可能是1个月、2个月或者1年之类，这个人会死亡也有这样子的这个梦。那么为什么梦到这样子的梦他会死呢？也就是因为他的气流人的意识跟人的气也有关系经常就进入到心脏或者大脑的某一个这个脉。那么这个脉为什么人的意识跟气流经常会进入这个脉？那么这个就是因为即将生命即将结束的这个一个症状也会有这样子的梦。
So there are dreams when an individual dreams about their own death. Perhaps repeatedly they receive this omen of their own coming death. And so when this dream happens often, perhaps even every day, or there's a special recurring dream of this nature, it's possible that the person might die in 1 or 2 months or 1 year. So why is it that we have dreams like this that serve as omens of our own death? Well, this takes place when our vital energy or the winds in our body enter into channels in our heart or brain, and this takes place when an individual lifespan is approaching its end.
好，这些都是1000多年前莲花生大师描述过的一些关于这个梦的一些解释。
And so these explanations that have just been given are ones that Guru Rinpoche over 1,000 years ago gave in relation to dreams.
然后除了莲花生大师的描述以外，还有藏传佛教的密法里面呢，也有很多很多更古老的这个对梦的解释。
And aside from these explanations of Guru Rinpoche, the Vajrayana teachings of the Tibetan tradition have even more ancient explanations of dreams.
然后我们大家的上师法王如意宝，他对这个梦瑜伽这个方面有特别的经验，所以我们也就过去听过很多法王如意宝的这个梦瑜伽的口述。
And Kambul's root guru, Kambul Jimmy Punsok Lama, wish-fulfilling jewel, himself had great experience in dream yoga. So as students, they heard a great deal of his personal oral descriptions of his experience with dream yoga.
所以这个梦是一个非常非常奇妙的世界或者现象。
So we can say that in fact, dreams are an extremely extraordinary world.
好，这个以上就是一个简单的说我们为什么做这样子的梦原因是什么。
So that is a simple explanation as to why we have these dreams.
我们接下来我们这个修梦瑜伽的话，那我们应该怎么样去修？
So now we are going to go on to talk about how we go about practicing dream yoga.
那么梦瑜伽的修法呢，我们刚才也讲了，它有很多很多层次。那么比较高层次的这个梦瑜伽呢，我们现在暂时不讲今天给大家介绍一些比较基础的梦瑜伽的修法。
So as mentioned before, there are many different levels to dream yoga practice. The advanced levels we're not going to talk about tonight, but rather describe a few basic practices related to dream yoga.
然后这个梦瑜伽的目的是什么？我们为什么要修这个梦？为什么要修梦瑜伽？就是因为好玩吗？是什么原因呢？
So why is it that we practice dream yoga? What's our purpose or our aim? Is it just for fun?
不是因为好玩我们直接进入梦里面去感受一下梦里面的世界，梦的世界，然后再回到现实生活当中然后就看现实生活就跟梦一样。
No, it's not just for fun. Rather, by entering into the dream and perceiving dreams and then returning to our ordinary waking lives, we are able to perceive them as being just like dreams.
我们虽然每一天晚上都在做梦，也就是说我们每一天晚上都在进入这个梦的世界里面，但是我们每一次进入梦的世界就是迷茫的就是迷茫，我们不知道这个梦里面的世界是什么，到时候我们都不知道自己在做梦，所以就没有办法去了解真实的梦的世界。
Even though we have dreams every evening, we enter every evening into the dream state. Because we do so blindly, we're not able to understand or perceive that we are dreaming.
那么现在我们需要什么呢？就是不迷茫不迷茫，很清醒的头脑很清楚的进入梦里面，然后再看梦里面的梦的世界是什么样的。
So what do we need then now? What we need is to go beyond this blind state and be able to clearly and lucidly enter into the dream state.
然后梦里面我们如果没有一点点的训练没有一点训练的话，那我们没有办法很清醒的情况下进入这个梦的世界。每一次要进入梦的时候，我们已经迷茫了这样子，所以就要做一点这个训练。
Without an appropriate amount of training, however, it's not possible for us to enter lucidly into the dream state. Every time we do so, we'll be confused. So it's important that we train ourselves to be able to enter into dreams lucidly.
然后这个训练有一个非常简单而非常有效的一个这样子的训练。
There's a way of training ourselves that is both extremely simple and also very effective.
然后这个训练的方法每次我们准备睡觉的时候首先去就几分钟这样子的时间当中呢，就是去很专心的去像我等一下我进入梦的时候也就是我做梦的时候，我一定要知道自己在做梦一定要认识到自己在做梦这样子反复的去思维，然后这个思维完了以后不要有其他的思维，然后直接进入睡眠。
So what we do in this exercise is every time we are getting ready to go to sleep for several minutes beforehand, 10 minutes or 20 minutes, we think to ourselves, we prepare ourselves by thinking, I'm now going to sleep and I absolutely must recognize the dream state. And by repeating this over and over and thinking this over and over, and then without thinking any other thoughts other than this, we enter into sleep.
因为我们的意识它就有一种这样子的这种力量 就是一种这样子的潜能就是比如说我们进入睡眠的时候过去没有闹钟这样子的时候呢，比如说我明天什么时候要起床要醒过来这样子的话没有闹钟这种情况下，然后进入睡眠之前非常专注非常认真的去思考明天我什么时候就是要这个时候我一定要醒过来这样子入眠，然后呢到时候一定会醒过来的。
And the reason that this is effective is because our consciousness, our minds have a certain power. They have a certain latent potential that is associated with the thoughts that we bring with us when we enter into sleep. So in the past, when no alarm clocks existed, it was still possible for people to think very intensely prior to going to sleep, to set the intention to wake up at a specific time. And by thinking this with great intention prior to going to sleep, it was possible for them to wake up at that hour.
除了睡眠还有大作的时候比如说有一种禅定是完全是控制了我们的思维的活动思维的活动完全是停滞了。那停滞了以后呢，然后就没有办法知道我什么时候从这个禅定当中出来他不知道应该什么时候出来。
And it's also the case with meditative states. It's possible to enter a meditative state or to do a practice that controls one's mental activity entirely, where it's possible to stop one's mental activity such that one is not even aware of when one will exit the meditative state.
但是这种禅定不能超过7天，如果超过了7天人的身体就承受不住。那这样子他怎么办他一进入了这个禅定的时候呢，因为他没有这种知觉没有知觉，更没有这个思维。那么什么时候应该出来呢他那个时候就没有知觉，他不知道应该什么时候出来。那就是唯一的办法就是还没有，就是要开始进入这个禅定的时候决定非常认真的非常专心的去想我打坐打3天3天结束的时候我一定要从这个禅定当中出来，然后打坐这样子以后呢，第3天的时候他一定会自然的从这个禅定当中出来那么我们的意识就有一个这样子的功能。
So if it's the case that a meditator who abides in this state of meditative concentration for this period of time is not aware or doesn't have any mental activity, well then how is it that they exit this state? I should mention that this state of meditation is not one that a practitioner can engage in for more than 7 days because their body is unable to endure a period longer than this. So if this is the case, then how is it that the practitioner exits the state if they don't have any mental activity in the state? Well, the way that they do this is by setting the intention, the mental intention, strongly before entering into the meditation to exit the meditative state at a particular time. So they might enter into the meditation with the plan to exit after 3 days. And this is, and then they enter into the meditation and then automatically or naturally after 3 days, they're able to exit that state. So this is a latent potential or power that our consciousness possesses.
然后人死了以后就会进入到中阴那么中阴的时候临终的时候也要用这种方法等一下我死了以后，我进入中阴的时候，我一定要知道我已经来到了这个中阴这个时候我千万不能迷茫，我必须要 清醒的、非常清醒的认识到当时的情况这样子临终的时候非常专心的去想然后呢，这样子以后呢，到这个中阴的时候他一下子就会知道自己已经在中阴当中这样子这种力量这种功能这种我们的意识的这种功能，佛教在很多时候都在用。
And it's not just in meditation, also at the time of death, one enters, or after dying, one enters into the bardo or intermediate state. And it is possible for the dying person at the time of their death to remind themselves that when they enter into the bardo state, they must lucidly recognize that they are in this state. They cannot afford to be confused. They must lucidly recognize the state. So this is something that they can think about with great intensity and conviction at the time of death, and then actually be able to realize that they're in the bardo state when they arrive there. So this is a capacity that our consciousness or our minds possess, and it's something that Buddhism frequently puts to use.
好，这种方法我们如果是稍微认真一点去做，这样子的话，1个月最晚1个月之内一定会成功的。
So this method or this exercise, if you are quite diligent, it's possible within a period of 1 month to be successful.
有些人呢也不需要1个月1-2个星期1-2个星期就可以。
Some people don't need 1 month, 1 or 2 weeks is enough.
好，这样子以后呢，我们开始做梦的时候他就立即就发现我在做梦然后呢，我现在看到的不是真实的这个就是梦境，我人已经在梦的世界里这样子非常清楚的认识到。
So by practicing in this way, it is possible for a person to clearly recognize that they have entered into the dream state and to see that everything that they see and perceive is not real, for them to very clearly recognize that they are in a dream.
还有我们在现实生活当中，比如说我们就是来到了，比如说像商场商场人很多的地方大街上或者是有些比较奇妙的比如自然界，比如说很神奇的森林岩石呀就是这样子的地方来到这样子的地方的时候呢，然后也就提醒自己这个不是现实这个就是梦我现在在做梦就是告诉自己实际上不是在做梦，实际上就是在现实生活当中但是这是一种训练要说而且要说要发出声音告诉自己这个不是现实生活，这是梦这个商场这么多的人，大街上这么多的人然后这个各种各样的，比如说花园森林等等这都是大海这些都不是现实的，这是梦就这么去想，然后要告诉自己这样子做训练，这样以后呢，很快就在梦里面就认识到梦的世界。
Another practice or method of training that we can put into use in our everyday waking lives is when we are in a place like a shopping center where there's a lot of people, or in a busy street, or in some kind of more extraordinary natural place, a forest, or by some cliffs. We should remind ourselves or say to ourselves that what we are seeing or where we are is not real, that we are in a dream, and we should tell ourselves this is not real, I am in a dream. not only should we tell ourselves or think this, we should also say it out loud. I am dreaming. So even though this isn't the case, we're not in a dream. We're in everyday waking life. Nevertheless, this is a method of training that we can practice. So whether it's in a shopping center, on a street with lots of people, in a garden, in a forest, by the ocean, we should tell ourselves and say out loud that this is not real, it's a dream. And by engaging in this form of training, it's possible for us to very rapidly recognize that we are in the dream state when we enter a dream.
几十年前大约20年前，西方科学家根本就不相信梦里面可以认识到梦。
Around 20 years ago, Western scientists didn't believe that it was possible to recognize that one was dreaming in a dream.
后来有一些科学家的自己有这样子的经验，然后呢，把这个事情告诉他们，然后做了很多的实验。后来现在西方心理学家有一部分的心理学家也用这种藏传佛教的方式在认识梦。那么他们有一部分人很早以前就成功就是认识到了梦他们不是学佛的人，但是呢，他们也就通过这个方式认识到了梦境。
It wasn't until some scientists gained direct personal experience of recognizing dreams that this started to change. And then a number of experiments were done. And then eventually some Western psychologists began to use methods from Tibetan Buddhism to recognize dreams. And some of them were very successful in being able to recognize themselves. So even though they weren't Buddhist, nevertheless they used these practices in order to recognize the dream state.
好，那么第一个我们认识到了梦那么认识到了以后又怎么样呢
So we've talked about recognizing the dream state, but once we recognize the dream state, then what?
然后认识到了梦自己在做梦的时候，然后在梦里面去刻意的、去故意的去感受各种各样的这些梦里面的这些各种各样的事情故意去感受。比如说从悬崖上面特别害怕看恐怖的时候呢，知道我在梦那么这就是梦，我不会死的我也不会受伤所以我要跳下去。跳下去没有跳下去的时候呢特别特别的恐怖但是呢实际上跳下去了以后呢什么也没有发生等等等等。然后呢先很清晰的进入了梦，然后呢到了梦里面就可以做很多的训练。
So once we have recognized that we are in the dream state, then it is possible for us to intentionally go about experiencing all kinds of things. So, for example, coming to the top of a tall cliff, ordinarily this is something that is very terrifying. However, and we have fear of injuring ourselves through jumping off it. However, in a dream it is possible to jump off it and for nothing to happen. So first we enter into the dream state with lucidity, and then secondly we are able to intentionally engage in all kinds of experiences and challenges.
然后在梦里面我们平时根本就不敢去做的事情不敢去碰的事情这样子的东西，然后在梦里面然后呢就可以训练训练了以后呢结果什么也没有发生没有受伤没有伤害，结果什么都没有发生。
So in our dream state we can have contact with things that we ordinarily don't dare to, or we don't dare to encounter. But in the dream state, by training through these experiences, we can realize that it's fine, that nothing will happen, that we won't be harmed or injured.
然后 通过这个训练，在梦里面深深地体会到一切都是虚拟的。虚拟的，如果只要自己不害怕、不恐惧、不执着，这样子的话，其实实际上是不会发生任何事情然后就是梦里面的这些各种各样的情绪然后就完全就可以控制了。
So by training in dreams in this manner, it's possible to gain a very deep experiential understanding of the lack of substantiality of dreams. And by not having fear and not clinging to the various experiences that we come across, we realize that nothing will happen. And so therefore it becomes possible for us to control the various moods and emotional states within our dream.
然后每一天早上从梦里醒过来的时候呢，然后就是坐在床上去想一想昨天我做了那么多的梦梦里面的那些东西就那么表面上看起来那么像一个真实的但是呢，我现在醒过来了以后呢这些都不存在，都已经消失。同样的，我现在又要开始面对另外一个生活另外一个世界，这个叫做不叫这个梦的世界，这个叫做现实生活真实的世界。那么这个真实的世界也就是我昨天晚上在梦里面对的这个世界一样，其实这个世界也是完全是可以消失的，可以消失的，不真实的这么去认真的去非常专注的去思考一下。
And then every morning after we wake up, we should sit there and look back, think about the dreams that we had that night, and we will and think to ourselves that we had many, many dreams. On the surface, they appeared to be real, but in actuality, they weren't. They disappeared. And we should also then think to ourselves that we are now moving into a different world. We are now coming to confront a different realm. This isn't the dream world, it is that of our everyday waking life. But it is the same as the dream state insofar as it too can disappear and it too is not real. So we should think in this way with great concentration.
好，然后我们呢，就是面对了一个新的世界，也就是现实的世界。这个当中平时我们把这个世界里面的所有东西，我们都把它当作是真实的然后呢，特别的执着因为这个执着让我们特别的烦恼非常的苦恼平时都是这样子。那么现在我们把梦里面的经验就拿到这个现实生活当中当然梦里面我们可以从悬崖上可以跳下去在现实生活当中当然不可以这个现在还不到时候但是呢有很多东西呢跟梦里面完全是一样，可以这样子看这样子以后呢，就我们对现实生活的这些执着这些烦恼就慢慢的会淡化。
So by entering into the everyday world of our waking lives, this is usually one that we regard to be real and substantial, and due to this we give rise to a great deal of attachment, which leads to all kinds of affliction and vexation. However, by bringing the experience that we have gained from our dreams into our everyday waking lives, it is possible for us to realize that they too are unsubstantial and unreal. So even though we might be able to jump off a cliff with no problem in our dreams, that's something we probably aren't quite yet ready for in our everyday lives. Nevertheless, we can look upon much in our everyday lives in the same way as we do during our dreams, and as a result of this, our attachment and negative emotion tension will become lessened.
好，这个时候，我们虽然对这个物质世界的执着就是淡化了没有那么的严重但是呢，我们人可以照样的可以生活照样的可以生存，但是这个时候我们的这个生存的目标生活的目的这跟之前是不一样不一样但是也一样的可以生活一样的可以工作不一样的是什么呢？不一样的这个生活这个工作不会给我们带来这么多的烦恼不会给我们带来这么多的执着和苦恼。
So in our everyday lives, in the material realm, we will our attachment to it will be less strong. It will be less serious. But this won't prevent us from continuing to live our ordinary lives. This we can continue to do. However, we will find that our purpose of existence, that our meaning in life will have changed. So even though we will can continue to live and work as we previously did, the difference will be that our ordinary lives, our working lives, etc., will no longer create such affliction, attachment, and vexation.
好，这样子我们从这个梦的世界和现实世界这两个世界当中一样的可以觉醒可以舒心我们可以醒过来完全是可以的。就像我们从梦里面可以醒过来一样，从现实当中也完全是可以的。
So from both of these worlds, from our dream realm and the realm of our everyday waking lives, it is possible to awaken. So just as it's possible to wake up from a dream, so too is it possible to wake up from our everyday waking lives.
那么我们继续做梦还是从此以后就从这个梦里醒过来这个最后就由自己决定。
As to whether we continue to go on dreaming or wake up from the dream, this is something that everyone needs to decide for themselves.
如果我们现在是不想醒过来，想继续做梦也可以，但是我们要准备要做一些好的梦不要做噩梦。
If we decide that we want to continue to keep dreaming and not wake up, that's okay, but we should endeavor to have good dreams rather than bad dreams.
然后我们要去思考怎么样去做好梦。
And we need to give some thought to how we should go about having good dreams.
好，今天我们的这个讲座讲到这里。
So that is the conclusion of the teaching this evening.
好，我们现在大家回想，把我们今天的这个功德分享给所有的众生。我们希望以我们的功德能够天下所有的众生幸福快乐，然后最后大家都能够解脱了脱生死以这样子的心愿做回向。
So we are now going to dedicate the merit of tonight's teaching to all living beings and do so with the aspiration that they all enjoy happiness and then ultimately achieve liberation.
Sunum dui dam zhe zeng ba nian dong ne ni bie zhang dang ba xue zhe ye ga nan jie wang long zheng ba zhe bing zhou lin zhou zhou er xiu om hong ban zeng ge zhe ban ma se de hong om hong ban zeng ge zhe ban ma se de hong om